Hi, I'm Stephen M. Miller. I write books about the Bible. I make videos from time to time to help people better understand the Bible. This is a bit different. Many years ago now, my wife miscarried what would have been our second child. I wrote about it when it happened because I'm a writer and that's what writers do. But I've never tried to out loud tell the story of what it's like for a husband watching from the sidelines. This was way back when ultrasound monitors showed the pictures in black and white. We were in the emergency room. I leaned close to the image on the screen. I couldn't see any sign of life. The hazy sonogram of our 8-week-old child, still a fetus, showed no throbbing that would suggest a heartbeat. My wife, Linda, is a nurse, and I asked her, "Is this a still picture?" She said no. And she continued to study the tiny figure on the monitor. The technician silently moved the scanner over Linda's abdomen to bounce the sound waves off the fetus and capture the shadows on film. Within a few minutes, she produced several photographs for the emergency room doctor. Hours before that, I had brushed fear aside. Light bleeding early in pregnancy is common, I had reminded myself. Linda encountered the same problem with Rebecca, our 1-year-old. After the doctor reviewed the photos and the results of several tests, he came into the treatment room where Linda and I had spent nearly the first half of this Sunday, my 34th birthday. The doctor said, "Linda, I'm going to order a couple of hormone shots." Hope surged inside me. I thought surely he wouldn't have done this had the new life already died. By 2:30 in the afternoon, we were back home. But 2 hours after that, Linda started to complain of abdominal cramps. And before long, she was gripping her stomach as the pain began to roll in on powerful waves. 30 seconds of intense inner squeezing would rise to a peak and fall, followed by 30 seconds of relief. Neither of us admitted it out loud, but we both knew this was labor, the final stages of a miscarriage that would deliver a fetus that could not possibly survive. Linda's doctor said he would meet us at emergency and that he would admit my wife into the hospital. Our reflex response was to scurry around for some overnight things and to ask our neighbors to watch little Rebecca. But when our minds caught up with our reflexes, Linda fell into my arms and sobbed. She said, "I didn't want this to happen." I held my wife. I stood there wondering what I could possibly say. Rebecca was sitting at our feet looking up and smiling curiously as if Mommy and Daddy were teaching her a new game. "It's okay," I finally whispered. It wasn't. At the hospital, I stood with the doctor in the busy lobby just outside the waiting room doorway. He spoke in a voice that seemed to carry naturally. People all around watched and listened. He said, "Your wife is in the process of miscarrying. We're getting her ready for a D&C. We'll do it as soon as the surgical team arrives." I said nothing. From my sad, stoned face, I looked into his eyes. He was searching me, I could tell. He said, "You can go into the room with your wife. It will be a few minutes before the others get here." Linda was lying on the examination bed waiting for me. She said, "Did he tell you?" I nodded. I wanted to say, "I'm so sorry, I love you," but I was engulfed in grief, and I knew that the words would only begin before they would dissolve. I didn't want Linda leaving for surgery after that. The morning would wait. So I sat on a stool at the foot of the bed, and when I did talk, it was about sedate things like blood tests and pain medication. For most of that time, though, I sat quietly as my eyes recorded the images around me, patches of veiled red on the sheets that covered my wife. A 3-foot swath of bright crimson streaking the floor between the bed and the trash container that was overflowing with bloody tissues and open packages that once held sterile medical supplies. And on the shelf, Beside the sink, a quarter-inch ball of flesh entombed in a clear plastic cup with a snap-on lid. Linda saw me looking at it and said, "The doctor thinks it's part of the gestational sac. He's sending it to pathology." I looked silently at the cup, and from the raw instincts of life there arose in me an almost overpowering desire to touch the cup and draw it close to me. But I sat motionless. In that instant there was a quiet explosion within, because I knew this was as near as I would get to our child. There would be no small, soft body to hold in my arms and mourn over, no baby to bury, no stone on which to engrave a name. No name. When a pair of nurses took Linda to surgery, they directed me to a large and lonely waiting room. There were 8 couches, 18 chairs, 13 tables, and me. No one but me. A mute television played its scenes while easy music fell from the ceiling like a gentle evening shower. I forced those distractions on myself, but I couldn't keep my mind there for long. Soon enough, I was thinking about life in miniature. Little arms and legs and hands and feet and eyes and nose and mouth. Even at 8 weeks, the life had all of these. Maybe I wouldn't have found myself swirling in this torrent of emotion had it not been for my little daughter. Without her, I wouldn't have known all that an 8-week-old life could become. The creation that was dying on a day I should have been celebrating life was just a fetus, an untouchable something I couldn't see or hold, a future event that wasn't yet real. So why did I feel such loss? I paced the waiting room and listened to the imagined sounds of a tiny life being drawn into a high-powered vacuum tube the width of a large straw. I knew that's what was going on right then as I stood there. Back home, there's a little girl with a two-tooth smile. She pats me on the back as I rock her in the early evening hours. As she drifts off, she coos, singing herself to sleep. In the solitude of that waiting room, my sad stone face melted. The life that could have been was gone. I mourned not only for myself and my wife, but for a life that would never breathe. Late that night, I drove home. I picked up my sleepy daughter. The neighbors stood on their porch and watched as I began the dark walk home. Once I passed the row of cottonwoods that shielded me from their view, I stopped in the shadows and buried my head into a tiny shoulder. The next morning began the condolences. "God knows what he's doing," said some of my Christian friends. I accepted their genuine effort to console me, but in silence I wondered why they thought God was responsible. Should we blame him if the egg implanted itself on scar tissue from my wife's previous C-section and was unable to draw the nutrients it needed? Would it have been his fault if a carrier of German measles came into contact with Linda and caused fetal damage that induced the miscarriage? No doubt God could have been directly involved in ending this life. He is God. No one better than him knows how the pieces of life and death fit together to create an eternal portrait. But to me, the heartache of it all seems so out of character for the God I've come to know. I think it's in his character to mercifully allow a body to release a life that would have endured just a few painful weeks or months, perhaps. And it is in his character to transform someone who is hurting into someone who helps heal another. 3 days after Linda returned to the medical surgical floor on which she worked, she came face to face with the family of a 50-year-old woman who had died 2 weeks after she was diagnosed as having cancer. The son-in-law told Linda, "I appreciate your empathy. It has really helped." I think I know where some of that empathy came from. And I believe it's in God's character to bring about something that happened the night of the miscarriage. That evening, Linda slept the kind of sleep you get from a medication more powerful than grief. In the early morning hours of a new day, she had a dream. Through a rippling haze, the texture of a reflection in a pond, Linda saw the image of a little boy. For a moment, the two looked at one another, and then Linda whispered the name we would have given our son. Jason. And the baby smiled. When Linda reached out to gather him into her arms, he disappeared. It was as though the dream was God's way of letting us know that our baby is safe and happy. I believe in an afterlife not only because of what the Bible says about it or what science reports about near-death experiences of people who are brought back to life, but because of an innate sense of immortality within me. I feel it there. I've never been certain, however, about the immortality of the unborn. Many folks would disagree with me, but I don't think the Bible is clear about this, and science doesn't help me either. But on those nights long ago, when I sat with my daughter and held her as she sang herself to sleep, I found myself wondering something. Could there not be, this very hour, in the most beautiful garden of heaven, an angel rocking a little boy named Jason? I think it would be like God to arrange this. Perhaps the answer is one we have to trust to creation's first father. There's one thing I know for certain. When Linda told me she could never name another son of ours Jason, I understood why. Hey, thanks for watching. Peace to you.